some more comments?
Just real fast, Ed is my mentor, and I'm a freshman legislator, so I'll just ditto everything that Ed says, because, is that right, Ed? Am I supposed to do that? Right? Right?
You don't have to do that,
All right.
but it's appreciated if
All
you
right,
do.
all right, all right. And Ed's my seatmate. I sit next to Ed. The only thing I would say, and it's not contrary at all to what Ed said, is I would appreciate that regarding tolling, I really believe, first off, I've been very outspoken. I don't think that any of you question where I stand on the bridge and tolling, and especially light rail. But that our citizens that work in Oregon need to be given free tolling. We're the third largest economic engine in the state of Oregon, and our people that commute across and work in the state of Oregon need free tolling. If tolling ends up happening, they need free tolling if anybody does. Other than that, I completely agree with everything Ed said, and Ed, I'd love to be on that letter, and I think we ought to try to get the other constituents in this area that are representatives to sign onto that letter for the audit. Tiffany, I appreciated your information. Isn't it interesting we could never run a business this way?
Yeah, you got that right. All right, our next question. How much of the cost is demolition of hotels, homes, and businesses? Which businesses are scheduled for demo? The train on Interstate to Expo is not heavily used, and they are hoping Vancouver will bail them out. Who would like to tackle that one? Tiffany?
I can't give specific answers now on who, but during our meeting, was it the last meeting 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, Ms. Boyd indicated that they were starting escrow already and were already purchasing land in some of these properties, specifically the hotel across the way, I believe, is in escrow already. And maybe somebody else here knows about the who's. That's one of the relationship things we're looking into, is who owns the properties that are going to be, I don't know if it's going to be eminent domain or purchased from by WashDOT or the CRC for this project. But they are starting escrow already. And when we indicated that they hadn't even really decided on what the bridge was going to be and where it was going to be, how can you start already going to escrow and purchasing land? She literally, it just seemed like, I'm not sure they wanted that information out, but they are starting that process.
Our next question, what is the most effective way to dissolve the CRC public-private partnership?
Stop funding them.
I'm not sure this is a question. It says more on environmental impacts. I guess maybe framed as a question, is there more work that needs to be done to study environmental impact? They spent $20 million on environmental impact?
I guess what I would say regarding environmental impacts, have we not built bridges across rivers before? Do we need to spend $20 million in new studies to determine what the impact is of building a bridge over a river when we've got how many thousands of bridges over rivers already? It's ridiculous, and that's one of the areas where we really need some reforms, and I definitely support such reforms.
And I believe that we're going to actually have fewer pylons now in the water. Is that correct? Than we currently have. So I don't know why the impact would be that. Why we're continuing to study it so much.
Okay, next question. Will citizens be able to vote on light rail? Will citizens of Clark County be able to vote on new I-5 bridge? And the third part is it true that the bridge cannot be built without inclusion of light rail?
I don't know what will happen north of the river, but I can tell you south of the river, citizens are no longer allowed to vote because they weren't voting properly. The last two votes that we had in 97 and 98, one was a statewide vote, the other was a tri-county vote for the north, what was then called the South-North Light Rail Project, ultimately to get to Mecca, apparently, which is Vancouver. Both of those votes went down. So since people didn't get the memo about how they're supposed to vote, we are no longer allowed to vote. And since then, we've built the red line and the yellow line and the green line, and we've incurred lots of debt, and we've never had a chance to vote. And now we have the most expensive project ever built, the $205 million per mile boondoggle to Milwaukee, also without a vote. So the issue of capital and operating costs and who's going to pay from the Oregon side, actually including the 2 payroll tax rate increases that are sending a gusher of cash to TriMet, none of that gets voted on by the people. That's the policy of Oregon. And our mayor, I don't live in Portland anymore, fortunately. The mayor of Portland has said, if there's no light rail, there's no project. My view is, fine, that's a good deal.
Again, I'll just refer to the research that we do on policy issues and also to use Sound Transit Agency in the Puget Sound region as an example, because they're about 10 years ahead of where light rail over the Columbia would be. And I would just make 2 observations. First is that state agencies, this is going to sound harsh, but I think it's true, they really don't care what people think once their funding is secured. So once a funding stream is secured, it's a tax base or tolling or car license registration, whatever it is that creates a funding stream that goes to the agency, public votes, public opinion after that is irrelevant. And that is what's happened in the King County, Puget Sound region. The second point is we tend to think of let's vote on this project or let's vote on what this agency is doing. And in a democracy, that's not really effective. What is effective is we vote for people. We vote for candidates for office. So connecting the light rail issue, if that's what people are concerned about, with people who are running for office every 2 years, every 4 years, that will get a response. As soon as candidates for office begin to see that that light rail is a negative for them for either election or re-election, that's when the public makes their voice heard, is through those regular elections.
Based on what I can tell, there will be no vote on the bridge, and it will be a limited vote on light rail. But I think in light of what's happened over the last several years, the fact that citizens have been shouted down, gavelled down, called goofballs, and basically had their suggestions ignored or dismissed, I think you should have the opportunity to vote on the entire project, and I think it should be a countywide vote.
Very good. Well, that answers the third part of this question, which was kind of a duplicate from earlier. So the last one that we have time for today is this presentation being covered by the media? If so, which ones? I think one answer might be it's being covered by cuv.com. Do we have any, are there any other members of the media here today? Looks like cuv.com owns this thing, the coverage. All right, I'll turn it back over to Josephine.
Thank you, Tom. You did a great job. Let's give a hand for Tom Hand, We the People. As far as the media is concerned, we had contacted all the medias around. We do have some writers in here, and their stories could be submitted, but we did contact the medias around, and we did invite them. So, do they want the people to know the truth? What do you think? So anyway, I just want to thank the legislators for coming here. I'm going to give them a couple of minutes of 2 minutes each and give them last minute comments, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Medora and do the, Tom Mielke, do the final drawing, and then we'll go from there. Thanks. Mr. Orcutt, thank you so much for coming. Do you have a couple minutes of comments?
I think I've pretty well made my position pretty clear, what I believe and what I think all of you deserve. I just want to thank all of you for being diligent, being a voice, a very loud and a very consistent voice. We're not going to win on this without the work that you're doing. Whether we can actually win on this, I don't know, but I know we certainly wouldn't if you weren't out there working hard and being a voice, a consistent voice. So I want to thank you for all that you're doing.
I'm sorry? We're gonna ask him. Okay, Tom, can you talk about that?
Oh, okay.
Take your own speaker.
All right, thank you. I tell you, it's not without effort. I personally took it to the Board of Commissioners and was told by our legal staff that we didn't have the authority to ask. I then took it to the Regional Transportation Council that I sit on that oversees the CRC project, and the same legal staff said that they didn't have the authority to ask or put it to a vote or even an advisory vote. I also sat on the CTRAN board. I then took it to the CTRAN board and asked for an advisory vote from CTRAN. I could not get a second. So while this seems to be manipulated and directed and agenda-driven for light rail, that's more of an argument why I have to appreciate people like you to give me strength to go back and bang my head against that wall. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Tom. And I might add, you know, this is what we're finding, Mr. Medor and Tiffany and I and all those that have been fighting, this is what we're finding is that what's being shown to us is not accurate. It's really sad when legislators, our representatives, are not involved in this process and they're kept in the dark. And the mayor, who some of you may have seen me go into city council, champion speaker according to the Columbian, they would cover that, but they wouldn't cover something as important as this. Go figure. They make us believe that this is the legislature's problem. And Mr. Mayor Tim Levitt has told me numerous times, this does not belong to city council. Never mind that they are the ones behind this mess. Never mind that the ones that we have right now that are running for re-election are the ones that have been block voting against the citizens on CTRAN. Now, how do you figure CTRAN, a little bus transportation, rules the states on this decision and over us? People, we have a problem. Tiffany can't see corruption. I think the rest of us see differently. Paul Harris, do you have something to say about this? Because Paul wrote a letter to the federal government protesting, and I'll let him explain.
Well, it wasn't just myself. I think Ed, numerous legislators. We sent a letter to the Federal Department of Transportation, and we're basically asking them to basically cease or at least give an opportunity for the people in our area to vote. And we got a letter. We got a response back from the Federal Department of Transportation, which basically, in so much a word, says to keep your mouth shut and let this project proceed. And actually that the project was going to proceed, really no matter with what I said. And I think it was signed on by Ed, myself, Ann Rivers, pretty much Don Benton, Zarelli, pretty much the Republican caucus in this area, and that the project would proceed. So my big concern, honestly, is transparency, of us being listened to, of us having an opportunity to vote on it, and for the will of people actually to take place in this. I really am concerned that we're completely being shut out. And really what Tiffany has brought up today is that, you know, we have no accounting for what's going on. We spent about I guess we really don't know, anywhere between 108 and 140 million dollars on something, and we don't know where the money came from. We don't know where it's gone, and we just don't. We should not do business that way. And as a freshman legislator, this year we took and we cut $5.3 billion out of the budget, and I can see why. Because if we're going to continue to do business this way, then we're going to end up in the hole again. We cannot continue to function this way. We need accountability on everything.
Thank you, Paul.